The operations room in Astana hums with the low, constant vibration of overloaded server racks. Console lights blink in disciplined patterns, each one representing a slice of Kazakhstan's scattered early warning net. Radar sweeps, AIS shipping logs, and low-orbit satellite feeds mix into a digital soup that analysts must strain, moment by moment, for anything resembling a threat. For nearly an hour, the screens offer nothing except the usual monotony: cargo ships creeping across the Caspian, the heat haze rising off refinery infrastructure, and the brief bursts of interference caused by atmospheric scatter. Then something shifts. A faint smear appears on one of the coastal radar feeds. Not a clean dot, but a jittering, low-altitude ripple almost drowned in sea clutter. It looks like noise, and the younger officers dismiss it as such, until the Doppler trace jumps just enough to break pattern. The senior watch officer leans forward, eyes narrowing behind smudged glasses, and delivers the quiet verdict that pulls every head toward the screen. Drone. He doesn't need to say whose. Tension thickens in the room. The earlier Ukrainian strike on Kazakhstan's Tengiz fuel storage yards had left more political bruises than physical ones, and nobody wants to be on duty when the follow-up arrives. Far out over the blackened Caspian, the intruder moves with methodical precision. It's the Ukrainian UJ-25 Kryphon, a long-range kamikaze drone designed to be less of a target and more of a rumor. It skims the water at barely 24 meters above the waves, gliding at a steady 228 km/h. Its carbon graphite frame reflects almost nothing. Its electric motor leaves no exhaust plume, and its autopilot constantly recalculates micro-corrections to ride the shifting wave clutter zone. The ocean below is chaotic, reflecting radar in a patchwork of false returns. Instead of fighting the turbulence, the Kryphon uses it as camouflage. Each time a wave crest rises, the drone adjusts altitude in real time. Each time humidity spikes, it shifts rotor RPM to minimize thermal contrast. The machine moves like it's made of instinct, though it's really just math executed at inhuman speed. To a radar operator on shore, it doesn't present as a threat, just a ghost flicker sliding across an ocean of noise. At the Tengiz oil export terminal, floodlights cut through fog thick enough to blur the edges of moving figures. Workers drag hoses, calibrate pumps, and check gauges without any sense that danger is already inbound. The giant storage tanks hum like metallic lungs, expanding and contracting under pressure. Everything feels stable, complacent, almost serene. But the defense crews know better. Kazakhstan's diplomatic warning to Ukraine had been measured, almost polite. Further strikes will be met with proportional response. The private directive was far less elegant. Nothing hits Tengiz again, period. Across the shoreline, the bar's QS-band radar spins with unwavering rhythm. Its algorithms evaluate millions of returns per minute, trying to find patterns in the chaos. Yet the Kryphon's radar cross-section, 0.008 m2, hovers just below the filter, threshold meant to prevent false alarms from birds and drifting debris. The system hesitates, unsure whether to classify the blip as a threat or a pelican surfing an updraft. Machines are smart. They're also stubborn. Inside an Arlen mobile command van, operators bathed in dim green light monitor the data stream. A flicker stabilizes. The Kryphon finally looks less like noise and more like something intentional. Altitude's wave skimming, one operator murmurs. It's using the clutter to hide. The senior tech responds with a grunt and shifts the Arlen M air defense system into firing posture. Hydraulic arms hiss as they raise the twin tubes holding 937 interceptors. The fire control radar narrows its beam, probing the sector where the target should be. But the sea is a traitorous ally. Reflections bounce off tanker hulls, warm air pockets, and metal mooring structures, confusing the targeting algorithms. The machine brain splits probability envelopes, evaluating trajectories, discarding impossible ones, and revalidating every half second. It takes 1.3 seconds to commit. A human might call that fast. A guided missile might call it forever. The system chimes. Threat confirmed. Out over the water, the Kryphon senses the change. It doesn't feel fear. It simply absorbs the fluctuating electromagnetic density around it and labels it as hostile targeting activity. Its control surfaces dip by a hair. It slides downward to 19 meters above the waves. Humidity thickens the air, and the propeller blades heat by a dozen degrees from friction. The autopilot compensates with a minute RPM adjustment that subtly alters its thermal profile. It's not fighting for survival. It's simply doing what it was built to do. In the command van, the first missile locks in. The fire control officer stares at jittering radar returns caused by a steel tanker moored off the southwest sector. Each ghost spike forces the algorithm to hesitate. The officer curses under his breath, slamming a palm against the console to steady his nerves, not the machine. Finally, the targeting solution stabilizes. Fire 1. The missile erupts from the launch tube in a violent plume, climbing hard, accelerating past Mach 2 before the sound of its ignition even fades. But the Kryphon is already adjusting downward, forcing the missile's early intercept geometry into a losing angle. Its autopilot predicted the launch the moment the EM field shifted. Humans see coincidence, machines see timing. The missile streaks toward its quarry. The drone knifes forward through thick sea mist. Kazakh operators scramble to compensate. And the Caspian remains dark, patient, indifferent, reflecting none of the tension unfolding above its surface. The missile cuts a jagged line through the night, its exhaust plume tearing the fog apart like a blade through thin cloth. Every few seconds, the targeting algorithm adjusts thrust to refine its trajectory, its seeker head glowing faintly as it pulses infrared scans across the water. The air around it boils. Pressure waves slap against the surface, sending bursts of spray into the dark. The Kryphon drone feels the missile's weight long before it hears anything. Sensors flag the sun. Spike in heat contrast. Missile. Exhaust reflecting off water. And feed the put data into its evasion subroutine. The drone angles its nose downward, lowering to barely more than a dozen meters above the waves. The move is abrupt enough to make the airframe shudder. If it were manned, the pilot would feel the sickening drop in their stomach. But the Kryphon feels nothing. Its autopilot calculates the ocean's surface as both shield and threat. The missile, diving after it, must predict where the drone will be 1 second ahead. The drone must avoid being predictable for even a fraction of that. The ocean helps, black, uneven, restless, but the missile is closing fast. On shore, the operators inside the Arlan command van hold their breath. The missile's telemetry feeds back into their screens in sharp green lines. One operator clutches the edge of his desk as if he can steer the missile, with raw hope alone. The senior officer mutters for the missile to cut him off, as though the drone is some reckless driver swerving down a mountain road. Everyone in the van knows what's at stake. Tengiz isn't just infrastructure, it's an artery. Losing it would bleed economic credibility in a single night. They've been warned that additional strikes would push Kazakhstan to proportional response. But what that response actually means is something nobody wants to say aloud. Everyone fears escalation. Everyone fears making the wrong decision even more. The missile continues its dive, and then the drone does something the operators do not expect. It climbs. Not much, just a gentle, unnatural rise. The kind a human pilot would consider foolish. But the autopilot has detected a trough ahead in the waves. If it rides that low pocket of air, the missile might overcorrect. The senior tech's eyes widen. "Don't do that! Don't!" But the drone doesn't hear him. Over the water, the Kryphon lifts half a meter. The missile interprets this as an escape attempt and dips harder, adjusting too steeply for its own lateral correction limits. Its seeker loses the drone for a microsecond. Tiny gap, but enough for its trajectory to falter. The missile rockets past the Kryphon by barely 30 meters. Its proximity fuse searching for metal, heat, vibration, anything. But the drone had just broken the envelope where the fuse could reliably trigger. The missile screams through open air and slams into the waves, detonating in a violent, upward plume of water and fire that briefly lights the night like lightning. The shockwave slaps the drone, rocking it sideways. The autopilot compensates. Stabilizers twitch. Course corrections fire. The Kryphon survives. Across the shoreline, every defense operator curses. Failure tastes metallic in the air. But there's no time to process it. The drone has cleared the outer defense bubble. Tengiz is no longer a target. It is now the inevitable endpoint of a quick and narrowing countdown. The Bars Q radar tries one last sweep. Its software frantically reclassifies the drone from possible to certain to critical. The system throws warnings across every connected console. The sirens at the terminal roar to life. Workers sprint for shelter as floodlights flicker on, turning fog into blinding white sheets. An internal system triggers the pipeline shutdown sequence. Hydraulic lines begin sealing, valves screeching into locked positions. The terminal's emergency protocol says it takes 11 seconds to fully isolate the primary manifold. 11 seconds feels like 11 miles. The drone is already too close. Crew aboard the patrol boat. Barris 12 attempt their last possible role in the unfolding disaster. A gunner aligns a 12.7 heavy machine gun with the drone's silhouette, barely visible through drifting fog. He fires controlled bursts, each round cracking into the night. Some hit. Sparks jump off the drone's tailboom, its left stabilizer tearing slightly. But the Kryphon compensates instantly by shifting torque across its twin booms, redistributing control in a way no human could manage with that speed or precision. The drone keeps going. The gunner lowers his weapon. He swears under his breath. Inside the terminal, two engineers race down a catwalk toward the main shutoff panel. Alarms echo in metallic waves. The whole structure feels alive, vibrating with tension. Heat radiates from machinery still pushing oil through massive arteries. Neither engineer knows exactly where the drone is. They just know it's too close. One looks through the fog and sees only blinding refinery lights. The other hears the faint whine of a propeller, somewhere above the waves, somewhere far too near. They reach the panel. They never get to touch it. The Kryphon slices through the final stretch, guiding itself into the base of the manifold. The warhead compresses. A fraction of a second later, detonation ruptures the world into flame. But instead of a massive outward explosion, the initial blast collapses an unseen gas pocket near the manifold, causing a strange inward implosion before the fire blooms outward. One wing of the terminal disappears in a rising column of fire and metal fragments. The other wing remains lit but strangely untouched, as though spared by the physics of an accident nobody planned. The shockwave rolls across the sea. The patrol boat rocks violently. Seabirds erupt into the sky. The fog glows a sickly orange. And just like that, the drone's mission, planned by humans, but executed with machine purity, is complete. Back in Astana, satellite feeds flicker. Communications jitter. Someone whispers, "Did we lose eyes?" Another answers, "They're not gone. They're hiding." The room falls into tense silence. Nobody breathes. Everyone waits for the next line of the story, not knowing whether humans or machines will write it.